This episode of the Barry Chronicles is proudly brought to you by Bariatric Support Australia.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Daniella. We're very, very grateful and we're really excited for this. So we would just love it if you would just share what's brought you to this particular point in your career.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It's been a long time coming since we first met, so thank you for your patience, but happy to be here. And I guess, bariatric dietetics was my first job as a graduate, and I fell in love with it straight away. And I guess the reason I fell in love with it straight away was that it was really nice to be part of someone's journey, to watch them go from, feeling a little flat about where their health status was to blossoming and embracing life. And as a dietitian and as a health professional, it's an absolute pleasure to watch that change and that progression. So I thought, yes, this is definitely the specialty for me. And I grew to love it and grew to learn more about it. And here I am almost 20 years later, but don't tell anyone that.
I love that.
Wow.
So look, a lot has changed in that 20 years since 2004. A lot of lap bands were being inserted and the sleeve hadn't really been thought about, and the bypass was a big scary operation that you'd rather avoid. And here we are down the track where we know now that the band really doesn't help or encourage a good relationship with food. It can lead to all kinds of, issues. And I think food is such a pleasure in life and it should be enjoyed. And so if the band is not doing that, then it's not right for us. So then the sleeve was determined to be a possible option. It was originally the first part of a bypass, whereby if someone needed a bypass but perhaps were at risk during surgery, they would get a sleeve, lose some weight, and then go and get the bypass performed. And then surgeons found that there was some successful weight loss with the sleeve, and hey, let's just leave it at that. Now we're learning more about the sleeve, and amongst the mix over the past few years has come the mini bypass, which although uses the term mini, perhaps from a nutritional point of view not so mini. So it's been amazing over a 20-year period to see how much it's evolved and how much it's changed, and how much the bariatric community, particularly the medical community, has embraced allied health and understood the importance of dietetics and exercise physiology and absolutely psychology. So then I found that, there's so much research done on everything that can change in the first 12 months after bariatric surgery. But what about those people that have had a great 12 months, 18 months, but then are finding some problems 18 months thereafter?
Yeah.
So that's when I thought, hey, we need to dive into some of the things that are happening here. And that's when I found out about, some of these issues around reactive hypoglycemia. So I thought when there was an opportunity to do a PhD on this topic, I thought, yes, why not?
For it. And we are just, well, I know for myself anyway, as somebody that lives with this condition day in and day out, any developments are heartily and warmly embraced, because it's such an incredibly confronting condition when it first rears its ugly head, and then learning to live with it afterwards. So we're very, very grateful that there are brilliant minds like yourself who are looking into these things.
I hope I can make a difference that will or learn something that will be groundbreaking for people like yourself, and just help kind of get on top of this.
Yeah. So could you tell us, and I guess for people that may never have even heard of the term before, can you break down what reactive hypoglycemia is? Yeah.
Yeah, look, wow, how long have we got? Yeah. So, look, reactive hypoglycemia is definitely a term that has been used for a long time. We're evolving into a term more like post-bariatric hypoglycemia or postprandial hyperinsulinic hypoglycemia, largely because reactive hypoglycemia, I guess, is a general term that refers to changes in blood sugar levels. But I'd like for my research in particular to focus on why it happens and how it happens in the bariatric community. So I guess for the sake of not getting tongue-tied, we'll go with reactive hypoglycemia, but I'd like to focus on it specific to the bariatric community.
Yeah.
And it is different from a fasting hypoglycemia, that maybe a type 1 diabetic might get, or, if you kind of drop your blood sugars because you haven't eaten for a while, because this actually happens after eating. Now, normally we find that there's a hyperglycemia after eating. In other words, your blood sugars will rise. But in this scenario, in a bariatric population, particularly with the bypass, we don't find this to be too much of a problem with the sleeve patients. And I guess in my experience anyway, I haven't found to be too much of a big difference in the mini bypass population, but the mini bypass really has only been done for a short while, and we have very little data on that. So my focus is definitely the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass, but there's no doubt the information will evolve, and I'm sure we'll find out more about the mini in the future. But essentially, within usually we find that this problem around 18 months to 3 years and up to 5 years after Roux-en-Y gastric bypass surgery. It can be as soon as 12 months. I do have a patient at the moment that has it at around the 12-month mark, and there's no real time frame which it can happen, but usually it's around the 12 to 18 month time post-operative. Usually occurs around 1 to 3 hours after eating. So it is different. That a lot of the research and even some of the papers that I've read from 2023 are still using late dumping syndrome and reactive hypoglycemia as an interchangeable term, and in my opinion, it's very, very different. And the biggest difference is really that late dumping syndrome, yes, your blood sugar levels fall and there is a blood sugar kind of component to it, but it will never fall low enough to develop what we call neuroglycopenia. And neuroglycopenia is when your blood sugars fall below 3 and you're at risk of maybe 2.7, something like that, and you're at risk of having seizures and all kinds of things. Now, that's reactive hypoglycemia. If you have late dumping syndrome, your blood sugars will never go low enough to really be at risk of a neurological event like passing out or having a seizure or something along those lines. So hopefully we can chat more about that throughout today's session. But so usually 1 to 3 hours after eating, what essentially happens, from what we understand, is that your insulin levels overshoot and become a little bit too high, and therefore as a result you have excess glucose being removed from the bloodstream, and as a result of that you feel pretty lousy. One of the main reasons I think in this might happen is because of the hormonal changes that occur after the bypass surgery, and in particular there's a hormone that's probably becoming a bit more popular, the GLP-1, and the reason why that might be more popular these days is through Ozempic and Saxenda and those kind of weight loss medications. But essentially what that does is it encourages the release of insulin. So if you've got this higher concentration of GLP-1 as a result of a bypass surgery, and it's encouraging the release of insulin after a meal to higher than normal levels, then you will have the job of insulin is to draw the sugar out of the bloodstream and store it in the muscle or the liver. So if you've got an excess amount of this particular hormone, you will end up having lower than normal blood sugar levels.
Right.
The unique thing about reactive hypoglycemia versus late dumping is that it can happen overnight. Whereas late dumping usually happens because we've had a very decadent hot chocolate with a nice hazelnut syrup that's maybe pass
Yep.
through a little bit too quickly. Reactive hypoglycemia sometimes occurs during the night as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It can definitely be very terrifying
I can only imagine. Absolutely.
when it strikes.
I bet, Tash, I bet. And the other thing that can be quite scary is that someone with reactive hypoglycemia are probably having more hypoglycemic events than they actually give themselves credit for, because your body develops a bit of an adaptation to it. So you can develop what's called hypoglycemia unawareness, where your blood sugar levels are a little bit low, but you're just not aware of it. And if we wear things like continuous glucose monitoring devices, you can see exactly how many times it occurs during the day, and that is definitely not late dumping. If it's occurring regularly to a point where your body's developed an adaptation to it, then you need to have a lower blood sugar level to actually be aware that it's happening, and that can get quite dangerous and not good.
Wow.
Wow.
So should someone who is having RH, should they maybe look at getting a continuous glucose monitor so that they can just, at least know when their blood sugar level?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan. If they really do feel that they've the whole concept of late dumping, it's definitely not associated with that, and there's something more to it. I really like the idea of continuous glucose monitoring. It gives us a lot of information, and it gives the patient a lot of information as well. And it also tells us whether the problem is occurring during the night, which can be quite dangerous. It's hard as a non-diabetic to get your hands on a continuous glucose monitor, but if your surgeon is on board, then for $15, you can get one for 2 weeks, and you can monitor your blood sugar levels. You just need a letter from your surgeon that allows for the company to provide you with that monitor. But there are some companies that for $99 a month, or for $15 for 2 weeks. And I usually find 2 weeks of data is more than enough to give us the information of whether it's happening or not.
Okay, that's very, very good to know.
That's great. I actually I had one for a couple of weeks because I got type 2 diabetes, which came back in all its deathly glory last year, and my HbA1c was like 15, and I was really unwell, and the doctor put me on a couple of different insulins, and so I got one because I just didn't think I was managing it that well. And it was so interesting, the data that came from it, and I was able to take that to my endocrinologist. He said it's really helpful in working out what strategy and what was actually happening.
I agree, and although it's a bit tedious, taking a food diary and trying to see the trends between what you've eaten and how your blood sugars have responded is really great as well. But good on you for doing that. I think it's very insightful.
Yeah, I know for me, I was right at the 18-month mark post bypass when all of this started for me. But it was a challenging time because that was during COVID. So there was a lot of difficulty, as you would imagine, particularly living in Melbourne in Victoria during that time. So it probably took a little bit longer to diagnose than what I was hoping it would, but it affected me to a point where I was not allowed to drive for nearly a year because my blood sugar was rarely above 4.
Yes.
So it was just such a hard time. And I ended up with a glycogen pen and all of those things because I was passing out so frequently. And it was a very terrifying time for my family. Funnily enough, with me, red meat really affects me.
Interesting.
Which is extremely strange. But if I just avoid it, which is hard when you need protein, and it's such a wonderful source. But if I just steer clear, then I can pretty much guarantee that my blood sugars stay quite okay. Still low, very low. But yeah, so it's odd because we wouldn't necessarily think that would trigger anything, but
I guess you're right. It's a good source of iron and B12 and protein and all those things. But to be able to narrow it down just to the one food item as opposed to a group of foods, that it doesn't kind of restrict you too much. But it would have taken a lot of hard work and a lot of trial and error to get to that point. And to have your license taken away, it goes to show how much of an impact it is, not only on your health, but on your life, on the things that you can do and how easy it is or how hard it is to do. Then that gets you down at an emotional point of view. So it's a real mind, body, soul kind of issue.
It was such a strange journey for me anyway, because it was the very last thing that I would have thought. I have celiac. So I already have a whole lot of things that I just simply can't have. I was at that time I'd been through my first plastic surgery procedure. My hemoglobin was very low. So my body, I needed protein. And for me, it felt like my whole world was falling apart because, here's the meat that I need to have for the protein, but now every time I have it, my blood sugar is dropping, to 1.7, 1.9. So it was, and we didn't really link it for quite a while. Me and my endocrinologist, it was just odd. It was strange. But anyway, we did get there in the end. But yeah, it is a difficult condition to manage, and I really wouldn't wish it on anybody. But do we know why? Do we know why that switches on at the 18-month mark? Do we know what it is yet?
Not really in a word, but I can give you a few ideas of what might be happening.
Okay.
I mean, there's lots of theories out there, and one of the biggest theories is it tends to occur, and I'm keen, Tash, to hear if this relates to yourself, but it tends to occur mostly in people that are pre-diabetic before surgery rather than diabetic before surgery. I
was.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is there's cells in your pancreas called beta cells, and the beta cells release insulin. And when you've got an insulin resistance, then those cells can sometimes expand, I guess, in a way where your body's trying to upregulate the amount of insulin that it's releasing so it can deal with the higher blood sugar levels. And so if you can imagine, you go into surgery as a pre-diabetic, because if you're a diabetic, then you've probably been treated and these beta cells haven't probably expanded quite as much. So you go into surgery and you have a significant loss of weight in a very short space of time. If you go into remission with diabetes slowly, then those cells tend to get smaller, and that hyperinsulinemia or that excess release of insulin isn't as great. But when you have a significant weight loss in a short period of time, those cells haven't had an opportunity to get smaller, and therefore they are over secreting the insulin.
Makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense.
Yes,
it really does.
Yeah,
it's felt to me like I was receiving the same type of insulin that I probably once would have needed, but now no longer need. And it absolutely just knocks me out, because I did lose 100 kilos.
This is what we're thinking is happening, and why the hyperinsulinemia is happening. And then, of course, you've got a suppression of what we call counter-regulatory hormones. So you mentioned earlier that you had a glucagon pen. If your blood sugars did go a little bit low, you would inject yourself with a hormone called glucagon, which encourages the release of carbohydrate from your liver and your muscles to bring your blood sugars back up. And unfortunately, one of the that glucagon is like the opposite to insulin, if you like. Insulin brings your blood sugars down, glucagon will bring it up. But with this reactive hypoglycemia, you have a problem counterregulating the hormones. So not only do you have an excess release of insulin, but you can't have that counter-regulatory glucagon influencing your blood sugar levels, because that system has kind of failed and broken down a little bit. So that's what we're thinking is happening at the moment.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's fascinating. It makes sense, and it lines up exactly. See, I can manage things if I eat very much within the range of foods that I know are safe for me. So if I stick within that particular scope, then things remain quite balanced. If I eat outside of that, then no. So all of that makes such good sense, and I'm so glad that that's actually what the research points to, and it's not just that I'm crazy.
Might still be crazy, but
I might be.
Henry, that's not your cue to agree. Yeah, so look, there's still a lot of research to be done. I think we need to appreciate that it's not the same as dumping. I think that's the first thing, and like I said, still to this day, some of the latest papers are using those terms interchangeably, and they're really not.
No, it's nothing like
And it really takes away from what people are going through, because to me it's like, oh, you hear dumping, well, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have had those 3 scoops of ice cream as a snack, and then this wouldn't be happening. Or, but when it, and I know people have sort of said that to Tash, oh, it's obviously something you ate. And it's like, well, a slice of brisket shouldn't do that to someone.
No.
And, it really takes away from what someone might be going through to, it almost feels like a bit of gaslighting that, oh, well, it's your fault anyways.
Yeah.
I'm on a mission. I'm advocating. I just want to go around the whole world and tell everyone this is a real thing. And you're right.
Yeah.
Look, the health, surgeons, GPs, some endocrinologists, they understand that reactive hypoglycemia is a condition, but how it relates specifically to bariatrics is not well known.
Yeah. So doctors that are listening, listen.
Please do that, because it's such a debilitating thing and terrifying for people when they're going through this. And we see it all the time on Bariatric Support Australia when people's blood sugars are just dropping, and they're rarely higher than 4, and their bodies are in crisis, and they are in crisis, and their life can literally just come to a grinding halt because they can't work, or they can't interact with their family like they would have once. And it can be such a frightening thing, because you don't necessarily understand why it's happening. Yeah. No.
You do reach out for help. You're not getting people who are understanding as well. So then it comes back to, is this maybe,
Yeah. You're dieting.
Yeah. Is it something I'm doing? Am I overreacting? Gee, if the medical profession doesn't know about it, or is wondering what it is as well, maybe it's, yeah.
Well, then even the term sort of eating disorder gets thrown at you.
That happened. That definitely happened with me.
It does cause that mental health sort of issues, because when you've got a doctor sitting there going, no, this is actually in your head, and you need to see a psychologist, when really, no, you need to see an endocrinologist and, a dietitian that can help you through this. It's really hard.
So with the people that you treat for this condition, are you seeing good progress? And in terms of longer term outcomes, what does it look like? And I obviously I understand that the research is relatively new, so of course we don't really know what longer term outcomes are yet. Does this impact on the potential for diabetes in the future? My mind's racing with all of the questions.
Absolutely. Well, look, I guess because it's not known or not popular or, not popular, what I mean by not popular is, because people are unsure how to interpret their symptoms, you don't hear a lot about it, or they perhaps, if they're out of the loop because they're otherwise doing well, then they're unlikely to reach out. So I guess I haven't had a lot of patients. I've probably only had two, and one at the moment who is in the process of doing the continuous glucose monitoring. So I really I'm working closely with Michael Talbot to hopefully get on top of exactly what's happening here. So I really can't help you, if I may be honest, I really can't help you with how the outcomes are going and how the interventions are
Yep.
going at the moment, because we're still kind of a work in progress. There's no doubt that nutrition plays a role. That's usually the first port of call, looking at nutrition. And as you say, we can't be always looking at carbohydrates and glycemic index and these kind of things, because a piece of red meat has no glycemic index at all. Yet
I know. So how does it do that, or why? But
exactly. And I think we underestimate how insulin is a hormone that is released after eating to regulate not only your blood sugar levels, but it is released as a result of fat and protein intake as well, which we can underestimate. And for those type 1 diabetics who are, have a sliding scale of insulin, they do need to take into account, the protein and the fats and those kind of things in the diet as well. So we need to really think more laterally and move away from carbohydrate and glycemic index, because it's not just a carbohydrate issue. The carbohydrate issue occurs because it's a hyperinsulinic issue. In other words, too much insulin is being released, and that can be released for any macronutrient. So I guess there was a second part to your question, Tash, and I'm terribly sorry. I've forgotten what it is. You mentioned something that was really interesting, and I've forgotten entirely what it
which?
was. As far as treatment and that kind of thing
Yes.
goes.
Yes.
It was?
Yep.
Yes. My apologies. So
No problem.
yeah, usually nutrition therapy is definitely the first port of call, because what we don't want to do is we don't want to reverse the surgery. We don't want anything invasive. We don't want to go down those kind of paths. You've already had a big operation. We don't want to have another one.
Yeah.
Ideally, we don't want to burden you with medicine as well, where you can try and avoid pharmacotherapy, then that's great as well. So definitely medical nutritional therapy, and working with the patient and getting that continuous glucose monitoring so that we can find out, for that specific patient, what their triggers are. But look, if the nutritional therapy just isn't working as well as you'd like, or perhaps it's working, but there's still that little bit of a concern or issue there, then pharmacotherapy would definitely be the next port of call. And there are a
Yeah.
number of medications on the market there that work on, insulin and trying to, essentially inhibit the insulin secretion so that you don't get these hypoglycemic events. And then the third point of call, if the medical nutritional therapy and the reduction in insulin secretion through medication isn't working, then what we do is we can put a peg tube into the remnant stomach. Now, this is where we're starting to get a little bit more invasive with our treatment approach. But a peg tube is essentially a tube that's inserted from the outside of your body into the stomach. And as you know, with the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass, you get a quite a small stomach around the size of an egg, but the rest of your stomach that's been bypassed continues to have a blood supply and continues to be viable and is connected to the small intestine still. So what we tend to do is we put a tube from the outside of your body into that part of your stomach that is remaining, not the part that's part of the actual bypass. And we feed you nutrition through that tube into that remnant stomach. And the concept there is that if it goes into that remnant stomach, then the flow of food will go back into its original flow. So
Right.
instead of bypassing the first part of your intestine, then the food or the nutrition or the macronutrients will flow back into that first part of your small intestine, the duodenum. And we find that that will, then next to no time, will fix the problem. So there's
Wow.
Incredible.
there's something
Yeah.
there that when you bypass the duodenum and part of the jejunum, which the duodenum is the first part of your small intestine and the jejunum is the second part of your small intestine, and usually with a Roux-en-Y we tend to bypass about 1.5 meters of your upper small intestine. So if you go back to using that upper small intestine that's been bypassed, then the problem goes away. So we need to work
Amazing.
that way, but having a long-term peg tube and being fed, through a tube into your stomach is not why we had this bypass. It's to, be the healthiest version of yourself with less invasive pharmacotherapy and medicine and all kinds of things. So I guess if you get really, really good results with the peg tube, then reversing the bypass is the other option, because if we can get the digestive system back into its original kind of anatomy, then we know that this reactive hypoglycemia will no longer be a problem, because we've tested the theory with the peg tube and inserting things back into the original digestive tract.
Wow.
Mm.
Who came up with that idea? Just
Oh, I'm going to have to get back to you with that one, because
no, that's all right.
well, I'm not sure.
I'm fascinated.
It's just like
Yeah.
such an intricate procedure, and just let's just try this and see how it goes. It's amazing.
It's amazing. And I guess the theory is that, okay, you didn't have this condition before the surgery, you have this condition after the surgery. So since you've still got your organs within your body, let's try and see if the problem still occurs by using the old digestive system.
Wow.
And yeah, it usually, more often than not, and very quickly, will become much, much better.
I mean, something that I found, and I really wasn't expecting it, because obviously after bariatric surgery, we're not advised to not eat carbs, and I certainly do eat carbs. Eating carbohydrate system is what has really helped me, which is quite strange and was nearly counterintuitive to the advice that I was given back when I first had my bypass. But now that I do eat carbohydrates in a balanced way consistently throughout the day, my blood sugar is far better than what it used to be, which again it still seems strange to me, but it actually seems to be working, which is wonderful. It's great. My times of being or collapsing are very, very few and far between. I think it's happened once in the last 6 months, and it was daily.
Wow. Okay. Well, that is a significant improvement. And look, I guess what's happening there is, I'm only guessing. So any doctors or other dietitians out there, please correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm guessing what's happening there, Tash, is that because your oral intake is quite small, you don't have a lot of carbohydrate or glycogen in reserve. So if you do go to a point where you don't have a lot of carbohydrates and your body is looking for maintaining your blood sugar levels by using that counter-regulatory kind of glucagon scenario, and then you don't have any in reserve, then your body goes into a spin. But by having that small frequent intake of carbohydrate means that you'll never get your body into a spin trying to look for reserves in your liver and your muscles, and therefore you don't get that hormonal response that can lead to a low blood sugar reading. So I think that is a brilliant result, and again, credit to you and your team for persevering and for the trial and error that you've been through to find your way to going from daily hypos to one in 6 months. I mean, that is a life-changing improvement.
Yeah, it was difficult mentally. It was a difficult challenge mentally, because it required such frequent meals. And that again was a departure from that initial advice, you know, those three meals a day, that are the no snacking thing and all of that. But I eat probably 8 times a day.
Absolutely.
And I keep it balanced. I try very, very hard to make sure that I'm having protein, fats, and carbs every time that I do eat. And I really did have my doubts about it all. I thought, oh my goodness, what if this makes me worse? I was very scared, but it seems to have helped, which has been so good because it was such an exhausting thing to be going through. And I did do, you know, a few of the different pharmaceutical drugs that are out there for, you know, for this type of thing. And while there was some improvement, but it was still happening. We started looking for what else, what else can I do? So yeah, I'm pleased that I'm now at this point. It would be lovely if it never happened, but once every 6 months is certainly much more manageable than once or twice a day.
Absolutely. And do you feel it coming on? Do you feel when it's yeah, okay, so
I do.
And your dog does.
Yes. And my dog also knows, which is, yeah, they're, and you know, he's not a trained animal like for alerting for those kinds of things, but we worked out that that's what he was doing. So he obviously knew when my blood sugar was dropping, and he would come and he would start pouring me and doing that. While we were going through this whole process of trying to work out exactly what was happening and how to help it, he was very helpful in that regard, because I would sort of eat when he would indicate that something was happening, and over time it started improving. It's very strange, but it.
I think, thank you for sharing that. I think that's an amazing story, and it goes to show that you need to just be open to anything, you know.
And everything, all the help. You know, I didn't have the blood glucose monitoring back then. I have done it since, but I didn't have it back at the start. As I said, it was during COVID, and it was a very crazy time. But I was testing my blood sugar so frequently, you know, 6 times a day or something like that. It was a lot. And every time my dog would come and do his little thing, it was always low. Yeah. So we just worked out over the last few years that yes, that's definitely what it was. Yeah, we've been able to slowly come up with what seems to be working for now. Of course, I've always got that concern in my mind that something in my body might change and suddenly I will be at its mercy again, but hopefully not.
Fingers and toes crossed, and all the hard work that you've done, and it just sounds like it's been an extremely, you know, like a roller coaster ride, you know. Nice. But I'm really glad that with all that you've learnt along the journey, that it's made such an impact. And may I ask, is it just red meat that's a problem, or is it chicken and fish? Is it any type of animal meat that tends to set it off?
It seems to be those more dense proteins. I've had it happen to me with kangaroo. Yeah. I've had it happen to me mainly with beef. Mm. But it seems to be those two particular things, not with chicken and not with fish.
Okay, so that's good. You've got that still in your diet. And you know what, sometimes we can't question it. If that, you know, if we've found a trend, just go with it, you know.
And it's odd, and I've asked myself all of the same questions. What am I missing? Is there something else that it could possibly be? You know, could it, I thought for a time maybe it was seasoning, maybe it was this or that, but no, it is just predictably those things.
Well, look, I'm just wrapped that you found, you know, you come to a conclusion and it's made a difference. I think that's really important, and because we don't want to reverse your surgery. We don't want to have you, you know, top up your nutrition via a peg tube, you know. And,
no, not
well. Of course.
What would you say to somebody that is having these symptoms. So firstly, I suppose, what should people look out for? And then what should they do if they believe that this is what's happening?
Yeah. Well, definitely what to look out for is things like the sweats and the tremors and, the fogginess in the mind and, all those things that we hear about that a type 1 diabetic going into a hypo might feel. They're all the same as a reactive hypoglycemia. The nasty thing is if it goes really below a blood sugar of 2.7 and that really high risk of having a seizure, that's where, and the fact that if you are having regular mini hypos, that your body determines that to be the new norm and that you have to have an extreme hypo for your body to actually alert you to the fact that this is not good. So that hypoglycemic unawareness is a real concern, and that's where the continuous glucose monitoring is really handy at indicating just how often it happens and to try and alert someone to a hypo much sooner so that you can maybe have something to eat with some carbohydrate or that will bring the blood sugars back up without what you don't want, though, is a rebound hypoglycemia. So, yes, nutrition does play a role, and having some carbohydrate to bring your blood sugars back up will certainly make you feel better. But what you don't want to do is feel so terrible that you have a whole packet of jelly beans instead of just 3 or 4 jelly beans, because what can happen is your blood sugar levels can spike again, and then you get another hyperinsulinic event. In other words, you get another influx of insulin that brings you back down to an extra low level, and it can be a real cycle if you do that. So as yucky as you feel, you really do need to be quite particular with how much carbohydrate you have so you don't create another scenario.
Yes.
But I guess what you really need to do is find a GP or speak to your surgeon or get a referral to a endocrinologist or find a bariatric specific dietitian, because there's dietitians, generalist dietitians, fantastic. There's then bariatric dietitians, those dietitians that specialize in bariatric surgery and all the nutrition related to that. But then there's the bariatric dietitians that have kind of been in the area for a long time, seen a lot of scenarios and can kind of pick it a little bit better. So I guess, ticking the box, seeing a dietitian, it's really all about seeing the dietitian that you think might be able to help you as opposed to just seeing a dietitian. We all have
100%. I 100% agree with you. And our dietitians are wonderful. They're so well trained. I mean, I love and appreciate all the work that dietitians do. And then there are our bariatric dietitians. And then there are the dietitians, as you've just said, who have been around bariatrics for a long time. They've seen these conditions and they understand them in a different way. They're the people that you need in your corner when you have this kind of condition.
Yep.
Definitely.
100%.
And often the GP is a little bit unsure and will liaise with the dietitian and it's great when you've got a team that all speak to one another and are all open to each other's thoughts and opinions and then can take their own specialty into consideration so that that we're all doing the right thing by the patient at the end of the day. If you do approach a GP, your surgeon, a dietitian, and they really just aren't giving you what you feel you need, or because no one knows their body better than they do. And if you feel that they are giving you feedback and it's just not specific to you, or it's sometimes there's a bit of trial and error where, we err on the side of caution a little bit, and then if things aren't working, we implement option B and C. But what we really need to do is understand that if you are feeling these signs and symptoms and you think it is different from late dumping, you haven't really had anything that could have led to a late dumping episode. And the way late dumping and early dumping differ is that early dumping is more of a gastrointestinal issue that happens maybe 20-30 minutes after consuming something quite high in sugar or fats, or maybe drinking too soon after eating, whereas a late dumping episode is more something that will occur a couple of hours after eating and usually affects your blood sugar levels as opposed to a gastrointestinal like loose bowel action. They can be interchangeable. The signs and symptoms can be a little bit interchangeable, but the main distinctive thing is that with early dumping you don't get a huge blood sugar response, whereas with late dumping you get more of a blood sugar response. Yeah, look, having the right team in your corner and, starting off with the more basic things in the hope that that will fix things before going to, into endocrinologists and medications, which we all want to try and avoid. Take your own diet history. A way in which you can really help the health professional is to take a diet history and maybe even in that diet history have how you feel after eating within an hour or two after eating. And, that way we can see any trends that, okay, you feel particularly flat and not quite yourself an hour after having some red meat. Okay, well, that's a trend that we can't deny. So taking that kind of information into when you see your healthcare professional will really help with, because it's highly likely they'll ask you to, take a diet history and a symptom diary and get back to them. So if you've got that already leading into the consultation, it just saves a bit of time. But look, ultimately, you absolutely need an endocrinologist, I think, in your corner, because they are by far the specialists in the area of hormonal changes and anything hormone related. And this is definitely a large component of this is hormonally related as a result of the gastric bypass surgery. Look, there has been some extremes where even part of the pancreas has been removed because the cells, the beta cells that we were speaking of before, have enlarged and aren't regressing. And so if we take away that part of the pancreas, then you've got less beta cells and therefore less insulin being released. But that is really something that you don't want to have to do, and it's not something that they're doing moving forward. It's definitely something from the past, and what it can do is make a difference to your reactive hypoglycemia, but then create issues around blood sugar control in other ways. So I guess really what you want to do is liaise with your GP, your surgeon, find a really good bariatric dietitian, an endocrinologist, and hope that they understand the condition and can guide you accordingly.
Amazing. So for any of our listeners sitting here going, you know what, I think that's me, but I don't have a dietitian that I can go to, or I'm not comfortable. Are you taking new patients on?
I would love to. I would love to try and help anyone that's
Awesome.
Got this issue. I'm based in Melbourne. I'm not sure but I'm happy to do video calls and telehealth and that kind of thing. But I really like to advocate for the patient. I think that that's really important. And if we do need continuous glucose monitoring, we do need the medical team involved to be able to allow for that to occur and for that to be released, especially if they're non-diabetic. So. It'd be a pleasure to help anyone out.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
We'll include your website in the video and in our description and that. So for anyone who is listening, the website will be there. This is just so amazing, and the information, stuff that I've never heard, and it's questions that we've asked, and
so much of what you've said has just confirmed for me what I've thought was happening and what I felt happening, and it makes sense. It all makes sense, which is for somebody like me. That's I don't know. Ever since I was a tiny child, I always wanted to know why is it happening? And when I don't know, for me, when I can understand why, I can at least get some peace even in the situation, because it's the unknown that I find scary. So thank you, because I have no doubt that people will feel a lot of comfort just understanding that it's not just in their head.
Thank you, Tash. I can actually relate to exactly what you've said, and it is a light bulb moment when you hear that someone understands and can somewhat explain, even though it's not entirely explainable just yet. Yeah, I get where you're coming from, and I think that's not necessarily just a bariatric thing. I think that's just a human trait that is really important, and we need to be validated when we're concerned about our health. And when you see
Yes, that's right.
a professional and they're saying, look, I think that you haven't done this well enough, or you haven't done that, or you haven't considered that, or you might think it's that, but it's really not. Well, you know what, I really, really believe that you know your body better than anyone, and it's I entered in this profession to listen to people and help them, and that is, you can't turn someone away when they truly believe something is not right with themselves.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us.
No worries. Look, thank
we
you.
have loved this.
Yeah, we've loved this, and I know that so many people are going to be able to access the correct information for themselves and hopefully be able to get the help that they need.
I hope so. Fingers and toes crossed. Well, I'm here advocating for everyone, and hopefully in the next few years it'll be something that will be common knowledge as opposed to what's that. So
Yeah.
Yes.
thank you for the opportunity. Thank you. Have a fabulous day.